Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with a different kind of video, a let's talk about episode where I'm going to try and talk about various topics and share some articles relating to this. So this episode of Let's Talk About is about climate change. I've got about 5 articles for you here, that some various ones that we will go through. But before I do, let's talk a little bit about climate change, because climate change, as you guys know, is one of the biggest issues on the planet, one that everyone is going to be affected by, regardless of who you are or where you are on this planet. It's happening. We're seeing it across the world. We're seeing more damage to the world before. We've seen lots of deforestation. We're seeing more carbon emissions than ever before. We're seeing more oil and gas being pumped out of the ground ever before as well. There's definitely a lot of pollution, I would say more than ever before, despite the fact that there has been changes in some nations and by some societies to go green. We have seen a change in some aspects, but we've also seen an increase of these oil and gas, for example, that are contributing to the damage that is of climate change. Now, there is always this people of climate skeptics who continue to try and deny and falsify the issue about climate, when quite clearly scientists have been saying this has been coming for a long time. Experts as scientists have been saying this for a long time. These are experts who have been studying this all their lives that have been telling us that this has been coming. And yet still, despite evidence, despite the changes in certain parts of the world where there's more droughts or less water, less ice in Antarctica, less of a seabed there, more ices are breaking up there, people still continue to deny it, continue to see it, and just say it's perfectly natural for us. Well, I don't think so. I don't agree with that premise. I don't think it's perfectly natural. I do think that man has, or the human race has played a damaging part on this. And it's up to us to play our part to make sure that we look after this planet that we live on, because there is no other planet. We're not at the point where we can start colonizing other worlds, yeah? And we don't want to destroy this world. We really don't. We really do love this planet, and I generally would hope that most people who follow me on here generally care about the environment, care about the wildlife that we have, care about the plants and whatnot, and want to play their part. Now, even the smallest of things, the smallest of details, when it comes to recycling and whatnot, they all contribute. They all play their bits. And I think it's really important that we emphasize how important climate change is. One of the other fundamental issues is happening right now is that we have a lot of nations, Western nations, I think it's fair to say, that are having their own financial or economic crisis. The well-being of people are cause for concern. Certain cost of living crisis, people's job securities and whatnot. These factors are playing into the distraction of climate change. While, don't get me wrong, developing countries and countries like the UK, for example, needs to deal with the issues that it has at hand, mustn't always forget about how important it is to address and engage with climate change and to make the changes necessary as soon as possible. We can't keep relying on oil and gas. We have to accept the fact that we need to stop and slow down on it. We can't just keep on going with it. We have to change our ways. We've got to go less from petrol and more to electric cars. We've got to change more to electricity. One of the fundamental issues that I've always thought has been, when we talk about some of the nations with the biggest emissions, the likes of America and China, it's quite shocking that you would think that the United States of America is one of the biggest emitters on the planet. But if they were to create a vast train network instead of relying on airplanes all across their country, they could reduce so much emissions there. And it's easy for me to say that, sitting here in the UK when we have a train network. It's not the best train network. No, of course, it has its fundamental flaws and we're very critical of it. But it's still better than us getting in a plane and flying from A to B, knowing that plane you're getting is emitting emissions when you could just get a train. We also need to look at ways that we can, in terms of flying as well, do we need to be flying as much as we need to be doing as well? Can we not look at other ways to do it? Should we be looking at those measures as well? These are lots of questions and lots of discussions that we need to put in place. And maybe perhaps now we need, from an international community perspective, start to really put the strain on when it comes to emitting emissions and making it more tougher and more difficult for people. I think we all need to do that. So there's some of my thoughts there. So like I said, we've got a couple of articles with regard to climate change and related to them as well. So let's read some of them into today, guys. The first one is from The Guardian, with the World Bank must take a quantum leap to tackle climate change, climate crisis, the UN experts say. Simon Stellar calls for a reform at development banks to enable governments to provide more climate finances to the developing world. So while there is obviously this, the issue that we have is obviously that tight strings are obviously being tightened, but in certain countries, certain nations, we have to remember, hey, we still have planets around, countries are struggling and they need aid, they need help. And while, yes, there is other factors that can be in place with regards to them, climate is one of them that needs to be addressed. And in some countries where they are suffering from severe drought, and we'll be looking at more drought in one of the articles here, reducing the funding for them means that those people are going to not be able to live in their inhabitants that they live in. And where do they go? They'll go to America, they'll go to Europe. Migration. Isn't that something that that you want reduced? You ain't going to reduce it if you're not going to be helping out the countries and the homes that they come from. Not many people are challenging on that, on wanting to fix the homes where these people come from when they migrate from. So I think that's something you need to take into consideration when talking about reducing foreign aid. So the World Bank must take a quantum leap to provide new finances to tackle the climate crisis or face a climate-driven economic catastrophe that would bring all the world's economics to a halt, the UN climate chief has said. Simon Still warned that there were just 2 years left to draw up an international plan for the climate that would cut greenhouse gas emissions in line with the goal of leaping temperatures rising to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. There is no room now for half measures, he warned, referring to the global heat that has surpassed the record for the past 10 months. Averting a climate-driven economic catastrophe is its core business. But still has held out a promise of global economic renewal for the developed and developing world if countries shift to low-carbon economy. Bold new national climate plans will be a jobs jackpot and economic springboard to boost countries that have global ladder of living standards, he said. They will increase food security and lessen hunger. Cutting fossil fuel pollution will mean better health and huge savings for governments and households alike. Governments will meet next week for the annual spring meeting of the World Bank with its fellow taxpayer-funded development bank from around the world and the International Monetary Fund. These institutions will play a key role in determining whether developing countries gain access to the finances they need to cut emissions and adapt to the efforts of the climate crisis. For many countries, they will only be able to implement strong new climate plans if we see a quantum leaping climate finances this year, Stiles said. He called for reform at the developing bank that will enable the governments that fund them to provide much more climate finances to the developing world. This would involve greater pledges of overseas aid and debt relief for those labouring under the heaviest burdens. For most important changes, the banks are leading practice that would give poor countries greater access to the future. Leaders of developing countries, including Mia Moki of Barbados and William Ruto of Kenya, have said such reforms could unlock hundreds of billions of dollars of finance. At present, leading practices are rooted in conservative estimates of developing countries' economic capabilities and not geared towards tackling the climate crisis. Now, one of the key arguments has been about getting foreign aid to some of these countries is the fact that it doesn't always goes towards these developing nations and actually ends up in the hands of corruption, which I can totally understand that, which is why there needs to be certain safeguards in place to ensure that money is going in there. How we ensure that money and ensures that money actually goes to the right places is a question that I don't have a straightforward answer with. But if you have a straightforward answer, please let me know. We can't afford to talk fast at the spring meetings without clear steps forward. There is an opportunity to make real progress on every part of the new climate finance deal all nations need. Sella told an audience of geopolitical experts at the Charlton House think tank in London on Wednesday afternoon. Alabranga, the new president of the World Bank, was installed last June after the resignation of Donald Trump's appointee David Malpass after a series of gaffes that suggested he did not take climate crisis seriously. Banga will be under pressure at the spring meetings, the core business of which takes place next week in Washington, D.C., to show that he's willing to address the climate crisis. Stolite called for the World Banks and governments to step up on the pace on climate financing, including addressing new sources of funds. These could include a frequent flyer levy and taxes on carbon emissions from shipping. Yeah, this is what you need to start slowly doing. Start taxing those who are causing emissions. This will help. This will significantly start hampering them and force them to change tactic and turn more to green technology in order to get things from A to B. Stella also warned the impact of the global cancer of inequality, which he said was worsening, and was implementing efforts to make deep cuts in emissions, and the investment was adapting to the impacts of extreme weather that are necessary to avoid catastrophics. Business as usual will further entrench the gross inequalities between the world's richest and poorest countries and communities that unchecked climate impacts are making much worse, he said. These inequalities are kryptonite and cooperative global climate action, and every economy, every country, and its people pay the price for that. Stella is Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the 1992 parent treaty to the 2015 Paris Agreement. Under the Paris terms, countries have until next year to present new national plans called the Nationality Determined Contribution, or NDCs, to cut greenhouse gas emissions in line with the target of helping temperatures rises to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, while pursuing efforts to limit them to 1.5 degrees. Current NDCs, most of them run till 2030, are inadequate to cut emissions to beyond extended needed. The UN is pinning its hopes on a revision of NDCs to run beyond 2030 that will require much deeper cuts. At the COP29 UN Climate Summit in Azerbaijan this November, countries are expected to set a new financial goal to enable the new rounds of NDCs due to be submitted next spring. Many scientists believe that the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit is already well beyond reach, pointing to the last 12 months of record temperatures on land and at sea. However, the Paris Agreement cannot be said to be breached based on the temperatures of 1 year alone, and many other scientists, heads of global institutions, political leaders, and experts argue that the world must keep aiming for a 1.5 degrees limit in order to galvanize action. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the gold standard for climate change science, has found that 1.5 is still possible, although an overshot temperature is likely to some form of removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is also likely to be needed. There was someone had a silly idea of putting it all in of sending a rocket into the sun and storing a bunch of CO2 in there. I don't think that's the idea. I do think planting trees would obviously be helping. I mean, it seems like a silly one to say, but it is something we do need to have serious conversations about how we will reduce our emissions for certain, guys. If we don't, we could have it could be serious consequences for us all. That is for sure. The sooner we address it, the better. So this is one of the biggest stories that took place around this time of the week as well. This was recorded on Wednesday, Wednesday the 10th of April, by the way, just for reference, anyone asks. This one is from Sky News. Human rights violated by climate change inaction, European court rules. So climate activist Greta Thunberg, 21, who was coming off multiple arrests during a demonstration in The Hague over the weekend, was among those who gathered outside the court. So Europe's top human rights court has set aside a 20,000-strong group of elderly women who said Switzerland government had not done enough to combat climate change. Senior Women for Climate Protection, whose average age is 74, said older women's rights are especially infringed on because they are most affected by the extreme heat that will become most frequent due to global warming. This is the first time that the court has ruled on climate change. Judgments from the European Courts of Human Rights are not legally binding for all 46 of the European Court's member states, but they set a legal precedent against which future lawsuits would be judged. The European Union, which does not include Switzerland, currently has a target to be climate neutral by 2050. The European Court of Human Rights sided with more than 20,000 Swiss members, but threw out a high-profile case brought by 6 Portuguese youngsters aimed at forcing countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In a mixed session of judgments, a French mayor seeking similar stronger government efforts to combat climate change was also defeated. Yeah, see, this is becoming a major issue here about whether excuse me Apologies, my apologies. Might just edit that out. Yeah, I'm losing my train of thought here. Obviously, they're following obviously what the law is stating on what they have stated on their law, specifically both the European Court of Human Rights or any courts for that matter. They're simply following the letter of the law that is implied to them on it. Yeah, I'm sure that most judges, I would say, that are fairly confident in believing in some kind of in climate change, but it's about the wording of the law and what the law states with it. So it is, I would say, unless it is enshrined in law, in some sorts that countries have to do it by law, judges are it's very hard for judges to swing their way in favour of the defendants here. Sorry, of those accusing governments and whatnot of not fulfilling their climate change pledges. So I would say it's a grey area because it depends on the laws of each country. It may depend on the law specifics on the European Court of Human Rights. So I think that's where the kind of the grey area is it for that. But that would mean you would need to change the laws to say that if countries aren't, if a certain country is not fulfilling a certain obligation on climate change that is enshrined in law, then they could be taken to court. But lawyers for all three had hoped the Strasbourg court will find that national governments have a legal duty to make sure global warming is held to 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels. We said that already. I really hope that we would win against all the countries, so obviously I'm disappointed that this didn't happen, said 19-year-old Silvia Ovia, one of the Portuguese playlists. The most important thing is that the court had said the Swiss women's case that the government must clear their emissions more to protect human rights. So their win is a win for us too and a win for everyone. Interesting. So the case that they use is on the grounds of human rights here. So that may be something that other cases may be able to use in the future. Greta Thunberg, who was coming off multiple arrests during the demonstration in The Hague over the weekend, was among those who gathered outside the court ahead of the ruling to cheer and wave flags. Highlighting the significance of the moment, Gary Liston, a lawyer with Global Legal Action Network, which has supported the Portuguese students, said, "A victory for any of these three cases would be one of the most significant developments on climate change since the signing of the Paris Agreement." And it is quite significant, but is it going to be a catalyst? I think is the question that people should be asking. Is this going to be the start of a catalyst of other cases? I'm not sure. Like I said, I think it comes down to the letter of the law, the wording of it, and how you can put this into a case from a lawyer's perspective when it comes to taking them to court. And that's going to be something that's going to need to be addressed, and how that comes across, guys. And I think that really matters. Guys, while you're here, if you haven't already, please hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. It really does help support the channel. Greatly appreciated. So this next one, guys, I've got is from France 24. So, you know, these it may seem like it's another flood, but you know, it's still a factor into climate change. So tens of thousands evacuated in Russia, Kazakhstan amid the worst floods in decades. Russia and Kazakhstan ordered more than 100,000 people to evacuate after swiftly melting snow swelled mighty rivers and beyond bursting points in the worst flooding area for at least 70 years. 70 years, guys. Now, someone's probably just going to say in the comments, oh, it's a one-off. Like, we've seen so many record-breaking things happen. Is it all just happens to be a coincidence to some people, doesn't it? The deluge of meltwater overwhelmed the scores of settlement in the Ural Mountains, Siberia, and areas of Kazakhstan close to rivers such as the Ural and Tobol, with local officials having risen by meters yards in a matter of hours to the highest levels ever recorded. Late on Tuesday, levels of the Ural River in Orenburg, a city of around over 500,000 people, reached 9.31 meters. That's 30 feet, exceeding the critical level of 9.3 meters. That's more than double. The regional governor has said he urged residents in the area at risk to evacuate. I'm calling for the caution for those flooded in districts to evacuate promptly, Dennis Tuller said on Telegram. The city residents paddled along the roads as they were in rivers. Dams and embankments were being strengthened. Upstream on the Ural, floodwaters burst through the embankment dam in the city of Osk last Friday. Regional officials said water levels in Oskos had subsided by 21 centimeters, that's 8.27 inches, and now starting to stand at 9.07 meters, still well over the official danger level of about 7 meters. Russia's emergency ministry said water levels had declined in a number of areas, but described the situation as still difficult. Ural is Europe's first longest river, which flows through Russia and Kazakhstan into the Caspian. Sirens in Kuskan, a city in the Tobol River, a tribunal of the Arish warning people to evacuate immediately. Regional officials said floodwaters will continue to rise for 3 days and predicted a difficult situation until the end of April. A state of emergency was also declared in Tulsman, a major oil producing region in western Siberia, the largest hydrocarbon bastion in the world. Russian news agency said Emergency Minister Alexander Kroskos had arrived in the city as part of the regional tour assessing the flood danger. These difficult days are still ahead for the Kuskan and Tomol regions. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters there's a lot of water coming. President Vladimir Putin spoke to President Kazakhstan Jomir Toskovich of Kazakhstan, where over 86,000 people had been evacuated due to flooding. Toskov said the flooding was probably the worst in 80 years. So the most severe areas are Atru, Arkatum, if I mispronounce any of these names, I apologize, Kroski, eastern Kazakhstan, northern Kazakhstan, and Pavlov regions, most of which border Russia and are crossed by rivers originating from Russia, such as Ural and the Tolbek. In Russia, anger boiled over in Oscars, where at least 100 Russians begged the Kremlin chief to help and charged shame on you at local officials. You said they had done too little. The Kremlin and Putin were getting updated on the situation, but had no immediate plans to visit the flood zones, as local and emergency officials were doing their best to tackle the deluge. Excuse me. In Krogan, a region of 800,000 residents, drone footage showed traditional Russian wooden houses and the golden koplos of all the Orthodox churches strained alongside the expanse of water. Russian officials have said some people ignored calls to evacuate Krogan. Governor Vadlim urged residents to take the warning seriously. So they're claiming, the officials are saying they warned people to get out of the area and people ignored it, basically. Whether that's true or not, obviously, I'm going to go out and live and say probably the Russians did probably say that, but some people just won't move from their homes, even when they're told. So it's entirely possible that Russia did say, we told you. We understand you very well. It's hard to leave your possession to move somewhere at the call of a local authority, Shimuk said. It's better that we laugh at the hydraulics together later and praise the God for the miracle of our own common salvations, but let's do it alive. In Krogan, water levels are rising above Tobol, and Russia said 19,000 people were at risk in the region. Rising waters were also forecast in Siberia's Ishkman River, also a tributary of the Arish, which is also along its parent. The Orb forms the world's largest, seventh longest river system. It was not immediately clear why this year's floods were so severe, as the snow melt is an annual event in Russia. Scientists say climate change has made flooding more frequent worldwide. But obviously some people will continue to deny that. But, you know, the biggest in more than 70 years. 70 years that they've had a flood like that. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy, guys. It's an insane thing when you think about it, when it comes to mind. That it's been 70 years since they've had something like that. That's a long time. And lots of records are being broken. We had so many records broken last year with regards to things with climate change and weather phenomenons. And we're going to keep having records broken. Whether you like it or not, it's going to keep happening. And we need to take it seriously, guys. If you want to financially support me in the work I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member as well. Being a YouTube member really does make a massive difference to and financially supports me the work that I do, not just here whenever I talk about all sorts of various issues here on the YouTube channel. You can do so as 99p members. You can get access to custom emojis. And you could also, whenever you leave comments on any of my videos, I do respond. Sometimes it takes a day or two for me to get around, but I always respond to members' comments. Also, another way you can financially support me is by buying me a coffee, where I get a bigger percentage than I do here on YouTube, and I can get an even bigger percentage if you decide to join me on Patreon. Joining me on Patreon gives you access to exclusive content there as well. I also have free content you can check out also on Rumble as well. You can also find me and all my social medias in the links in the description down below. So thank you for everyone who has financially supported me in any way, shape or form. It is greatly appreciated. 2 more articles left here, guys. The next one we got is from the BBC. This one here is from the Morocco drought. Satellite images show the vital Ali Musca reservoir is shrinking. Another, are we going to say this is just a coincidence as well? Much of the reservoir bed is now just cracked earth here. Morocco's second largest reservoir that serves some of its major cities has been essential to farm irrigation is drying up according to satellite images analysed by the BBC. Massira Dam, which sits around halfway between Casablanca and Massira, contains just 3% of the average amount of water that was there 9 years ago, figures show. 6 consecutive years of drought and climate change, which cause record temperatures, have led to more evaporation and threatened water supplies across the northern African nation and hit agriculture and the economy in general. The satellite images that BBC looked over were taken in the same month, in March, over the successive years from 2018 to 2024. Morocco's second largest dam is drying up. Drag the button to see how the water's dispersing. So you have one side here. So this is how it looks now in 2024. This is how it was in 2018. What a massive difference. Wow. There's literally... What a difference. That's crazy. Are we going to say this is just a coincidence as well? Nothing to do with climate change, obviously, people are going to say. That's terrible. That's terrible. Look at it now. So dry. And you can see the green. You can see the green here that it was 6 years ago. And now it's looking very deserted. It's just not getting the water anymore. They show a stark transformation in the landscape, with areas that are normally green becoming partial and beige. The image is also a clear depiction of rapid change in the reservoir surface area. Professor Brian Thomas, a hydrologist who has analysed satellite images for NASA, said. The appearance of the water has also changed, indicating shifts in land and the use of flow of river and feeding the reservoir. But the impact of the drought is not confined to areas around Al Masfa, it stretches across the country. Agriculture accounts for just 90% of water consumption in Morocco, according to the World Bank data from 2020, and farmers have been suffering. Ajawaz El Wadiz cultivates cotton and wheat, as well as rearing sheep and goats on his land to the east and Al Ali near the capital Rabib. But he has reaped a little in recent years. The most difficult drought we have experienced in history this year, Mr. Wadi has said. For me, the current agricultural year is lost. He's aired and stillbirths because of the lack of water and food available to the sheep during the drought. Even the nearby wells fed by groundwater has little in them, he said. A short drive to the nearby valley and the broader issue becomes visible as rivers clearly affected by the droughts come into view. Sawadi said he thought that about 30% of another reservoir sitting behind the Simi Mohammed bin Hamad Dam, located further upstream, remained. The farmer has been forced to sell sheep and turn to agricultural loans in an effort to support himself and his family. He said the state had provided some help, but it was not enough. Recent rainfall has led to short-term respite, but ultimately is nowhere near sufficient to counter the consecutive years of drought. Aside from the impact on agriculture, the shortage has also affected the country's famous hammams, or public steam rooms and saunas, which have been ordered to close for 3 days a week to save water in key cities. The authorities have launched a national campaign in an effort to encourage people to conserve more water. In January, King Mohammed V chaired a meeting looking at the water situation across the country, where Water Minister Nikhil Bauer said there had been an alarming 70% drop in rainfall between September 2023 and mid-January compared to the average. The King urged the ministers to redouble efforts to ensure supply of drinking water to all regions, according to a Royal Palace statement. To help ease the situation, the country is investing in more seawater distillation plants, but these facilities require a high amount of energy and can inject concentration of salt water and toxic chemicals back into the sea and oceans and are more harmful to the environment. Yeah, see, this is a catch-22 situation here. You got this abandoned decade boat. It's now a long way from the water's edge as well. This used to be That used to be water there. You can even see on the land there, it's there. While there is some grass here, but Massira has been particularly badly hit by a lack of rainfall and a change in climate, according to the Water Ministry. It has continued to supply water to cities such as Kalabiska and Mariisk, the country's tourist capital, but its use for irrigation by farmers has been suspended since 2021, the Water Ministry told the BBC. The reservoir lies on the Olm in Aba River, the second longest in Monaco, which has experienced a significant reduction in inflow and can be traced back to its sources in the Middle Atlantis Mountains. Professor Adel Falouka Bonanolka, an expert from the Mashrik Kai Adi University, said that all the water resources flowing into the river were shrinking and many springs that feed it have disappeared. The higher areas in the mountain range had also not seen unusual snowfall, which, when melted, supplied the river. Environment analyst Professor Abdel Al-Nassan told the BBC. The situation has been exacerbated by evaporation, which increases as the heat rises. Last year, Monaco recorded its highest ever temperatures of 50.4 degrees Celsius on the 11th of August. 50, guys. 50. It's insane. All this added together meant that the freshwater system in Monaco were crossing thresholds and records never seen before. Dr. William Fletcher, a geographer at the UK Manchester University, has said. His research has shown how sensitive Monaco is to climate change. Pollen records indicate that Atlas cellular trees that have survived in Monaco since at least the last ice age are now at risk of local extinction, Dr. Fletcher has found. He has said his long-term projections mean that Monaco will have to continue to adapt to more frequent droughts. It's important to recognise that there has always been droughts in Monaco throughout history, but global climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of droughts, and it will continue throughout the century. Look at this. You can see there's still obviously, you can just see the dryness in the picture here. It's insane. It's absolutely insane, guys. That's really bad. And it's only getting worse, guys. It's only getting worse. We have to reverse this stuff. We have to reverse this. This is not all just down to nature. This is us needing to take responsibility of our actions. We have to take ownership and responsibility for our actions. Not just individuals, but international governments have to continue to apply pressure on them as much as we possibly can. It's really important. And this last one from the Association Press, you guys. Broken record, another one. March is the 10th straight month to be the hottest on record, scientists have said. For the 10th consecutive month, Earth in March set a new monthly record for global heat, with both air temperatures and the world's oceans hitting an all-time high for the month, the European Union Climate Agency Copernicus had said. March 2024 averaged 14.14 degrees Celsius, 57.9 degrees Fahrenheit, exceeding the previous record from 2016 by a tenth of a degree, according to the Copernicus data. And it was 1.68 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the late 1800s, the base used for temperature before the burning of fossil fuels began growing rapidly. Since the last June, the globe has broken heat records each month, with marine heat waves across large areas of the globe's oceans contributing. Scientists say that the record-breaking heat during this time wasn't entirely surprising due to a strong El Nino, a climate condition that warms the Central Pacific and changes global weather patterns. But in combination with the non-natural marine heats making these records so breathtaking, said Woodwell Climate Research Centre scientist Jennifer Frascas. With El Nino warning, the margins of which global average temperatures are surpassing each month should go down, Francis said. Climate scientists attribute most of the record heat to human-caused climate change from carbon dioxide and methane emissions produced by the burning of coal, oil and natural gas. The trajectory will not change until concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stop rising, Francis said. which means we must stop burning fossil fuels, stop deforestation, and grow our food more sustainably as quickly as possible. Until then, expect more broken records, she said. Under the 2015 Paris Agreement, the world set a goal to keep warming at below or 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, since pre-industrial times. Copenhagen's temperature data is monthly and uses a slightly different measurement system than the Paris threshold, which is averaged over 2 to 3 decades. Samantha Burgess, Deputy Director of Copenhagen, said March's record-breaking temperature wasn't as exceptional as some other months in the past year that broke records by wider margins. We've had record-breaking months that have been even more unusual, Burgess said, pointing to February 2024 and September 2023, but the tragedy is not in the right direction, she added. The globe is now experienced 12 months average monthly temperature 1.58 degrees Celsius, 2.8 degrees Fahrenheit, above the Paris threshold according to Copenhagen data. In March, global sea surface temperatures averaged 21.07 degrees Celsius, 69 Fahrenheit, the highest monthly value on record and slightly higher than what was recorded in February. We need more ambitious global action to ensure that we can get to net zero as soon as possible, Burgess said. And that is it, guys. That's the thing. We need more action. And these are just, this is from various different news outlets, covering this situation. There's hundreds of thousands of stories out there of the damage that is being told by climate change. We need to take it seriously. We have to take it seriously. And if we don't, it's going to affect us all. It is. It's already affecting some of us now. Some of the poorest countries are suffering due to climate change. And we've just seen some of them there. And there's so many more stories that we don't talk about, that we don't know about. So we do have to take responsibility for them. This story is not going to go away. Climate change is not going to go away. You can play it down, you can try and kick it around or whatever you might will, but there are many, hundreds of scientists will always keep saying that this is an issue and needs to be addressed. Politicians, businesses, don't know anything about climate change. Scientists do. The experts do. The ones who've been studying this for decades do. Listen to them. Don't listen to a politician. Don't listen to a businessman. Listen to what the scientists are telling you about climate change. Because they are the experts, and the experts know what's best, guys. So we come to the end of this episode of Snowflake talking about. What did you guys think of it? Did you find it interesting, informative, helpful? I'm not quite sure if this format is something I'm going to keep doing, but it was something I wanted to give a try and see what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think of some of what we covered here today on climate. What we'll cover next week, I'm not sure. It probably won't be climate, it might be something else, but I do think it was an interesting one to talk about because it is a serious issue and one that we all need to take very seriously. But let me know what you guys think about climate change and some of these stories in the comments section down below. But before you go, guys, if you haven't already, please consider hitting that like button. Be greatly appreciated. Share us across social media so others are notified of this video. And subscribe because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further and financially support me in the work I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content there as well. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope to catch you all very, very soon.